12:05 in the afternoon here on 90.3 FM. It's time for Helping Seniors of Brevard. Some good music to dance to here this afternoon. Let's get things underway with your host of Helping Seniors of Brevard and the executive director of the organization as well. Here is Kerry Fink.
Thank you for getting us in the mood there, John. Welcome to Helping Seniors Radio, 12 noon, right here on 90.3 FM, WEJF. We always gather around the radio lunchtime on Wednesdays. It's a great time of the week and look forward to it. And welcome if you're listening online at WEJF.net. And those of you who catch our podcast later, every place you get good podcasts, from Apple iTunes to Hey Alexa to Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it, you'll find Helping Seniors Radio available on your podcast. And the reason that we try our very best to get this information out to you is as a Florida 501c3, which is just a fancy word for nonprofit organization. We're a charity right here in Brevard County, Florida. And our mission, as set out by our president and founder, Joe Steckler, is to inform, educate, and connect seniors and their families to resources. And so what we're always trying to do, in addition to operating the county senior information helpline, which we've done now going to our 13th year, that's that free call to 321-473-7770. You will either speak with Nancy Deerdorf, our operations director, or Karen Warnland, who is also now increasingly helping us with the just simply the call volume that's coming in. Last year, we took over 5,450 calls on that line from seniors and their families, and they're always asking us things, and because of the organization's specialization and expertise in things of seniors, we usually know where to go. And one of the reasons we know usually where to go is because we have a great network of people who help us in this area. One of those is our special guest today. He is board certified elder law attorney, Bill Johnson with William A. Johnson, PA. The reason Bill is board certified is because that is I guess that's like the pinnacle of what you can do as far as like certifications and things like that, right?
It is.
Okay. So that puts you in the elite of the elite. And what we try to do when we get asked questions by the seniors and their families is we try to find the absolute best go-to resources in the county that's going to get the job done and figure things out. And so when I had the pleasure of trading emails with Bill and said, what should we talk about this time? And it was really, he said, let's go for avoiding probate. And I thought, that's a great topic, because I remember we've had this conversation before, Bill. If you don't have a plan or make a plan, there is a plan for you. The government has made a plan for you. It's so kind of them. The only problem is it may not be the plan that you had in mind, right?
Exactly.
So we've spent a lot of time talking. And listen, the other half of what we do with helping seniors, in addition to doing our very best to help callers and their families navigate, we call what we do senior navigation. We help them try to find a resource that's going to make a difference in whatever situation they're up against. But I also know this from having done lots of radio with Bill and lots of TV shows with Bill, that even though your office is very good at helping folks out of tight places, it's very frustrating because the options are limited. The costs get enormous because you have to get court systems and all kinds of things involved. And I hear you preach all the time about let's get people to pay attention ahead of time so that the costs are pretty small and then the options are pretty great. So the other half of what we do is helping seniors, in addition to trying to help people who are reacting to situations, is point them in the right direction where they can get help ahead of time. Our president and founder, Joe Steckler, has always called it an aging plan, and then we call it euphemistically getting your ducks in a row. And so, Bill, as we've been on this journey now for a couple of years about helping people get their ducks in the row, we came up with a couple of corollaries. The first one is don't try this on your own. We are fortunate to live in an area where there's so much good help. And Bill, you and I have done radio shows about the pitfalls of watching guys on TV say, oh, you can do your own estate planning on your computer. And then you end up making big bucks as a law firm because at the time that these documents and things needed to work, they don't. And of course, now it's an emergency, and now options that existed early on just aren't even on the table because it's just, like I said, the government has a plan for you. And so that's what it is. The second part, though, is that we've been talking, and I think it's going to be our theme for next year, and we're calling it "Don't Be an Ostrich." Okay, so now we're getting the whole barnyard in, right? We have the ducks, now we have ostrich, because what we're going to talk about today, avoiding probate, is exactly this. If you're an ostrich and you stick your head in the sand, another appropriate thing because we're beachside, right? But then you really have limited the things that you might be able to do with everything that you spent a lifetime putting together, and you want to take care of your family and the people that or maybe you want to help a great charity like the Helping Seniors of Brevard organization. I'm just saying, but you have to have a plan, Bill. You can't just let it run down the way whatever statutes tell you. And it seems so easy to do this when you have time to think about things. You're not under pressure. Doesn't cost a lot. You can do all those things. But let's start with maybe the basic question. What is probate?
Great question, because that's where I wanted to start. But probate is the process where we put your will, if you have a will. If you don't have a will, there is a intestate statute that determines who gets what. But we file a petition for administration. We submit the will, the death certificate, and then ask the judge basically to appoint the person named in the will as the executor. And if everything's okay, the judge will issue an order admitting the will to probate and then issue something called letters of administration, which gives the executor the authority to manage the estate. We also then file that notice to creditors in the newspaper, and we have to send known creditors a notice to creditors telling them they have 3 months within which to file a claim if there is a claim to be filed. And then at the end of the 3 months, we've mustered the assets. We either paid the claims or we disputed them and went through that process. And then what we have left over, we pay out basically the cost of administration. We give a fee of 3% to the executor. We call that the personal representative in Florida. And the attorney's fees. And then anything that's left over gets divided per the will amongst the beneficiaries. So you can see with those components, first off, it takes easily 9 to 12 months to get through probate.
Yeah.
You have the personal representative's fee, which is 3%. You have the filing fees. You have the fees for the attorney, which usually start out at 3% of the first million of assets in probate. And so it can be very timely. It can be very costly. It runs through the court system. So there's a lot of reasons in Florida why you want to avoid probate.
Well, and if you think about it, the very first thing that you said, I was just thinking about this because most of us assume that these government regulations are going to help us. But I know we've talked about stuff, because we talk about how many blended families there are, or maybe people who are, they're together, but the paperwork doesn't line up with all that. And then so at the time when all this has to go in front of a court, it looks kind of messy, and the thing that you might have thought was going to happen isn't going to happen.
Very true. If you have a blended family and you die without a will, the statute says half of it goes to your spouse, half of it goes to your kids from your prior marriage. And that may not be exactly what you want to have happen.
Right. And so you really have the luxury of saying what you want to have happen and how you want things to flow. But if you don't, I guess, write it down and figure out a plan, number one, on the best of circumstances, it might just turn out the way you want, but that's from everything we're talking about. It doesn't sound like it's possible that was the likely outcome. But then I'm just thinking like, well, if everybody could just agree on everything, we wouldn't even need a court system, right?
Right.
So what happens when, somebody passes away? We see this all the time on the news. Somebody famous passes away, and all of a sudden somebody finds a will stuck in a couch someplace. There's all this stuff that happens, right?
Right. You could end up in a lot of litigation. Yeah.
And so then that's another problem because, you're there in the great beyond, hoping this is all going the way you had in mind. And then you find out maybe the person that you really wanted to make sure was looked after isn't, because there's some squabble going on back down here on Earth or something. I don't know.
Correct. I mean, the reasons you would challenge a will or any sort of transfer could be undue influence, fraud, coercion, duress, lack of capacity. Those seem to be the popular ones.
Yeah, and then I also want to, because you mentioned two things, right? You said the person who is named, I guess in other states they call it an executor, right? But here in Florida we call it the personal representative. But it's the person who is in charge of putting all these things that you're supposed to do together, right?
Yeah, running the mustering the assets, paying the debts, and then distributing the net proceeds to the heirs.
Now, you said that person by themselves is entitled to 3%, right?
Correct. So on $1 million probate, the executor would get paid $30,000.
Wow. So and we don't necessarily, most of us don't walk around thinking we're like excessively wealthy, but even with home values, I guess you can get to $1 million estate real quick.
You could.
And then you said the attorney's fees also, that's on top of that, right?
Correct.
So now we've used up, am I saying this right, 6%?
60,000
out of $1 million.
Yep.
Wow. So, and if we would just plan ahead, we could avoid a great deal of that 60,000 if we just had $1 million estate. Am I saying that right?
You are saying that correctly.
So how do we do that, Bill?
Okay.
In general terms, I guess.
In general terms, there's really three ways you can avoid probate.
Uh-huh.
One is that you put a beneficiary on the asset.
Okay.
So all wills go through probate or get filed with the court. Not all your assets need to go through probate.
Okay.
So we want to basically eliminate the assets passing through probate. And we can do that through several different ways. One is you can put a beneficiary designation on it. And nowadays you virtually can put beneficiaries on everything. You can put a beneficiary on your bank account. It's called payable on death. You can put a beneficiary on your brokerage account. That's called transfer on death. You obviously are probably familiar with the beneficiary forms you fill out for life insurance,
Sure.
Annuities, IRAs, 401ks. And if all those have individuals named on them, all those assets will avoid probate.
So that does two things, right? Because it speeds it up, because then immediately whoever you had in mind can access whatever we were talking about.
Yes, all they got to do is get a death certificate.
Right. And then the second thing, so it speeds it up, but then there's it's not having to run through that almost 6%. Well, it is 6%, right? That we were talking about if it goes through the probate itself.
Right. You can also put a beneficiary on real estate. That's through the use of something called a ladybird deed. It's kind of like a pay-on-death deed.
Uh-huh.
You transfer the property from yourself to yourself and retain all the rights to do anything you want with the property during your lifetime, which means sell it, transfer it, mortgage it, whatever. But if you die, then it passes to whoever you've named as the remainder beneficiaries on the deed.
Wow.
And that transfer from you to them occurs when you pass, and then they have a death certificate and they record it in the county records.
So again, this is like outside of this whole probate 6% process. And I guess that's the thing that I would like for all of us to remember as Bill's talking to us about this, that, we don't think that we're rich, maybe, but when you just talk about $1 million estate, and we just said that's $60,000, That's real money for people, I think.
It is. That's a huge amount of money.
And then I read, like if maybe beyond your house you have some investments, you maybe have a brokerage account or an IRA or different things like that. I mean, these numbers could be several $1 million, and then it's not 60,000; it could be a couple $100,000.
Correct.
Wow. Why don't we do this, Bill?
It's a good question. Good question. Well, let's go on to the other two ways.
Okay.
The second way is if you have some sort of title on the asset with survivorship rights.
Okay.
That would either be joint title with rights of survivorship or something called tenants by the entireties, which is available to married persons. And generally speaking, when one of you dies, the survivors own the asset.
Okay.
No probate needed. The problem, though, is obviously if you have everything in your name says husband and wife, and you both die, then we have to take that asset through probate. So generally, with two people on an asset jointly titled with some sort of survivorship rights, it's not the problem on the first to die isn't there, but the second to die, obviously, unless we have another joint owner on the asset that's been added, we would have to probate that asset. Wow. So that's probably the least effective. The third is a revocable living trust. You can create a trust, put your assets in the trust. You dictate, who's going to be the successor trustee after you're gone. That's the person in charge of managing the assets. And then you can dictate what happens to those assets when you pass. Who do they go to, how they go to those people. And you can plan for spendthrift children. You can plan for special needs kids. And you can do a lot with a revocable living trust. Now, the reason a trust avoids probate is you're putting your assets in the trust, and in the trust document, you name a successor trustee. Mm-hmm. And what happens is when they put on that hat to act as the trustee, they become bound by the terms of the document, which again are muster your assets, pay your debts, and then distribute to your beneficiaries. And because we have that alternate mechanism to do all the things that a probate court would do, we don't have to go to probate court.
Right. Which doesn't that seem to be the complicated and probably expensive part of this is, number one, you're in the court system, so everything becomes totally public, right? Because, you can just go on the clerk of court site and see what's going on for anybody in the land, right?
Yeah, with some limitations, but yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying like the flip side is if you want your business, if you set up the trust and you do everything correctly legally, then that part of it doesn't really come into play.
Correct. It's much more private.
Right, which you might need. I guess I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing with this, but I'm saying that, everything that you're telling me, I know people who will clip a coupon so they can save 10% on a package of chicken.
Right.
Okay. So we're just saying like if you do this right, you could save literally the better part of 6%. It's not a package of chicken. It could be $60,000 or something, depending on your own personal. So. Why don't we do this? Is it because we don't know, or we just want to ostrich this and put this off? Or
well, at least with beneficiary designations, it's readily available. All you got to do is go down to the bank or the brokerage firm and tell them you want to add beneficiaries to the accounts. So it's very simple to do with regard to that. As a general rule of thumb, you want to make sure that your assets are either in a trust or all have a beneficiary on them.
Well, and then the other point that you're bringing up about the real estate and things like that is it really just seems like it would be so smooth to make the transfer happen the way you're talking about, as opposed to, again, running it into a court system where somebody may pop up out of the woodwork like 50 years ago this happened. I don't know. I'm sure you could tell stories.
Exactly. And the other thing is you're not giving them a forum to do that.
Right.
Right.
Wow. So you have every advantage to do this and every reason to avoid, like you said, avoid the probate. So this is probably a dumb question, but is there ever a time that probate is useful? I realize it might be mandatory, but is there a time that you say, like, this is a good legal strategy?
If you have a large amount of debts, it might be useful because probate has a specific way on how debtors get paid. So that would be, maybe something useful because that could get sorted out in the probate because they have to file claims and then you can negotiate and do a lot of things like that. Or if you, want the security of having something that went through the court system with court orders and, like you said, somebody's not going to, if there's a finality when you close that probate, it's done.
Yeah.
And nobody can come back and upset the apple cart again.
Interesting. So I guess there's so many different factors to consider here, but it really seems like for probably like 98, 99% of the cases, you would want to be proactive in the planning because I guess the other part that you're making me aware of is the predictability of the outcome, right? Because, if you take charge of this and you say, this is how I want this done, I want this to go over here, I want this to go over here. Like I said, we could be making assumptions because we're not lawyers and we just think, well, this makes sense. I've been living with this person for 20 years. So, they're going to get my stuff and that's what I want. But it doesn't work that way if there's not like all the legal paperwork that backs all that up.
Correct. Very true. And, it may also depend on how you want them to get your stuff.
Yeah.
I gave the example of a spendthrift child.
Sure.
Which is a child who spends every nickel he gets.
Sure.
So you may want to have a trust set up where you dole that money out over time.
Right.
Instead of giving them a lump sum that they're going to go blow.
Get a Ferrari.
Or special needs children who can't, can't have over $2,000 in assets for Medicaid or SSI.
All right.
So we can't just drop the money in their lap and knock them out of the program. So we have to do some special planning with that in a trust setting to make sure that those assets that are held in the trust don't count as an asset to that child.
Yeah, and that makes me think of a question I want to come back on the second half of the show and ask you kind of coming out of the box. We're about at the mid-show. I want to be sure that we let folks know, because you do a lot of seminars that are available free of charge where you are basically providing information. I know you do them at One Senior Place. You're going to be doing them at the Senior Resource Center Brevard, which is our own little Helping Seniors location there. But how do people get in touch with you? I know the website, Florida Elderlaw.net. You've got a lot of great resources there.
Yeah, FloridaElderlaw.net, or they can call the office at 321-253-1667. And I do have a seminar on estate planning tomorrow.
Well, how fortuitous.
10 a.m. at One Senior Place.
Good. Well, we're going to come back and we're going to continue the conversation with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson on the second half of Helping Seniors Radio.
And that's String of Pearls music with the Glenn Miller Orchestra, kind of the music of your life. And we're listening to some conversation of your life right now.
That's a good way to put it.
Yes, it is. With your host and executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, Kerry Fink. Kerry?
Hey, thank you, John Harper. It's good to be back for the second half of Helping Seniors Radio right here on 90.3 FM. WEJF, as we get together every Wednesday at lunchtime. Welcome back online, WEJF.net, and welcome if you're still listening along on the podcast. We appreciate you being here, and I think you're going to find the second half of the show just as fascinating as the first half. Before we jump right back in with our special guest, board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of the law office of William A. Johnson, who, if you remember the cliffhanger that we left you with going into the mid-show break, is that tomorrow you actually have a estate planning session that's available at One Senior Place, which is a great place to go and get some education. And again, Bill, before I want to say something else before we jump back into today's topic, but if they're interested in that, I want to get that phone number so that they can, if they want to try to get in on that tomorrow.
They can call the office, 321-253-1667.
And it's free. So you, and it's
10 o'clock.
No obligation. You just this is your chance to learn and continue the conversation that we're having today on the radio about all this. So as we talk a little bit about this, I wanted to talk just real quickly. There's some neat events that are coming up at the Senior. That's easy for me to say. The Senior Resource Center of Brevard. And what's fun about this for us is this is the first time as Helping Seniors, our little organization that Joe Steckler, who got the Brevard Alzheimer's rolling and created those Joe's Clubs, he said this is always a vision he's had from day one, is to have us have a place. There's a lot of things that are going on at the Senior Resource Center where we can put people together for getting access to a lot of good resources. We have a lot of great partners in the Senior Resource Center. Everybody who's part of Helping Seniors is, in fact, part of the Senior Resource Center. But there's some great events that are going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Like next Tuesday, we're talking about the 7th. There's two fun things that are happening actually on a Tuesday. They're doing a thing called Food Truck Tuesday, which is actually going to be lunchtime, 11 to 1 p.m., and they're bringing out a food truck, and it's going to be like, I think, the whatever Tuesday that is of the month. They're going to try to do that, and it's a fundraiser because first of all, you get to meet all the people at the center, a lot of the doctor's offices and things there. People are joining in. They're going to, you can get a great lunch. 10% of that's going to come back and fund Helping Seniors. So we're just trying to build community there. But the other thing that's happening next Tuesday is our friends at Cloud Clinical Trials. And if you were listening to our radio show just last week, we had Kerry Sapp, who is Kerry with an M, as we were joking about when she was here. She is having the doctors actually set up free memory screening at the Helping Seniors Senior Resource Center Brevard. It happens actually, I think it's all day, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the center. There are a couple of appointments left, but it is by appointment. There's no charge to you or your insurance, but you get a great baseline, and you might even be invited to participate in some of those trials that they're doing, which are not like, these are not the early trials. This is like they're getting ready to put this stuff on the market to help you with dementia and Alzheimer's and things like that. They can explain all of that to you, but it's absolutely free. It's 100% safe, but it starts with getting a memory screening and getting kind of on that chart. So if you're interested in finding out about that, just give us a call on our Helping Seniors Senior Information Helpline, 321-473-7770, and we'll come back and give you some more information about that and see if that makes sense for you. Also, at the end of the show, I'll have another couple of items to share with you. So I'm going to ask you to grab a pencil and a paper so you could just jot those down and see if that has meaning for you. But again, next Tuesday, there's a couple of fun things going on at the center. The 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. food truck Tuesday is what they're calling it. And it seems like it's going to be a fun time. Looking forward to that. And then those memory screenings, absolutely free of charge, but you do have to have an appointment with our friends at Cloud Clinical Trials right there in Vieira. But they're coming to us, so you can just come to the center. We're located right there in that beautiful Omni. We call it the Omni Professional Tower. It's right there on the medical campus there, just a block or two from the hospital there in Melbourne. It's that 4-story building. It says Omni Healthcare on the side. They've been so kind to make available to us space on the second floor. So that's where the Senior Resource Center Brevard is located. And you are welcome there because we're doing our best to get information in the hands of seniors and their families that will make a difference along the way. So kind of with that, Bill, I had said we started talking about some of the program title is Avoiding Probate. And if you missed the first half of the show, I want to encourage you to go back and pick that up. That's why we put everything back out on our website, Helping Seniors of Brevard. We do the podcast. We put it on our YouTube page. We put it on our Facebook page because we want it to be available to you, because you will learn a lot about why you do not want to be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand about this stuff. Because we were joking in the first half of the show. I've seen people clip coupons to save 10% on going to the movies, and so that's a $20 investment. This, we were joking. If you had $1 million estate, just think about the value of your house and maybe some other stuff. You might have a bank account or a savings account. Not impossible to get to $1 million today, or even more. And the probate stuff, Bill, like we were talking about, the kind of like the minimum tab is probably 6%, right? 3% to the personal representative, 3% to the attorney.
Correct.
So we said on $1 million, that's $60,000.
Correct.
And so there are lots of good, perfectly legal, perfectly appropriate ways for you to avoid paying that $60,000 or whatever it is in your case by just simply planning ahead.
Well, let's do an example. Say I have a widow and she owns her house. She has a couple bank accounts and a 401k or IRA. You know, it would be very simple just to, have her put, make the bank accounts payable on death to her 2 kids. Mm-hmm. Then we do a ladybird deed for the house that goes to the 2 kids. And then she can get with whoever holds the IRA and fill out a beneficiary form saying, everything goes to the 2 kids. And then, she passes. We just have to give 4 death certificates, give one to the bank, one to the IRA company, and then record one, and all those assets transfer outside of probate.
And so we just saved that lady $60,000. I'm just in our little hypothetical world
Correct.
that we're playing with
Correct.
here. But and then just think if you had maybe a vacation house and some other stuff, now we're probably, it could be more than that you're saving.
Correct.
Why not save this money and then put it towards your favorite charity, helping seniors of Brevard, or whatever. I'm pitching us, but you know what the point is. Don't give away your money. Make it do what you want to do. And so that was a question that because we were talking about the value of setting things up when you were talking about special needs children. But then I asked you this question during the break, and you said, no, that's actually an okay question to ask too. My question was this, because I know in separate shows, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about Medicaid planning and the importance of getting things right, legally, correctly. So, because your concern is not only for the person who needs that Medicaid care at a facility, but you also got to look after the well spouse who is at home still kind of keeping things going and moving. And so I asked this question. I said, suppose you had everything set up the right way for Medicaid planning for the spouse, and then the spouse who's independent or on their own passes away. You might have just caused a problem for the Medicaid person because now they inherited a bunch of stuff.
Exactly. Even if it goes to the spouse on Medicaid, or it could be left to the children, and one of them could be on Medicaid.
Wow.
So, you have to do some planning with that regard, but there is a way to pass the assets that the individual can get use out of those assets without losing their benefits.
This is the part that really is incredible when you think about it, because we've talked about this both in terms of Medicaid planning. I know we've talked about it with VA planning, because all those people have these very serious restrictions, not only on what you can have and not have, so that you qualify, but even like we've talked about the mistakes people make along the way because they didn't know better about understanding that Medicaid has this look-back period, and apparently now VA does too. And so you say, well, my kid's going to get the house anyway, so I'm just going to title it over. And now you've caused big problems even there before we even start talking about probate and stuff like that.
Correct. Medicaid has a 5-year look-back, so you can't add a kid's name to the deed or transfer the house to somebody and try to get around to having that asset.
Yeah, this is a true case of what you don't know can hurt you, because, again, like we were joking at the beginning of the show, we said, the government has a plan for you. I mean, if you don't have a plan, they got one all ready to roll. It just may not be what you want.
And it's all about preserving your wishes and your choices.
Yeah, and so, again, like we're opening up this segment with and talking about, when you have just a reasonable estate of any kind, by the time you look at that basically 6% overhead, and that's kind of a minimum, right? Because that doesn't count court fees and whatever other stuff goes into it. You could save all that when you sit down and do a consultation and say, well, here's actually where I'm at. I've got this property here. I've got this bank account over here. I assume that's the process you would actually go through if somebody said, okay, I heard you guys talking about avoiding probate. I want to learn what I could do here. That's probably the conversation you would have, right?
That is correct. We would look at, who are the beneficiaries of, who are the family members, the heirs. And then we'd also look at what the assets consist of and what's the most effective way to get those assets to the heirs.
And I'm thinking about this. When you see those offers, you're watching TV and the commercial comes on, and there's a bunch of pots and pans, and they say, this is normally $249, but we're going to discount it, so you're going to pay, whatever they tell you, and by the time they finish with all the specials, and we'll knock off one payment, it winds up being, $49 a month. But I was thinking about just to just get this in people's minds to think about. Well, we're talking about if you have $1 million estate and it's going to cost you a minimum of $60,000 to do this right and get it through probate, which I don't guess you really have a choice if you didn't plan ahead to do anything else. So what we're talking about spending, if you'll get on this early, it's not $60,000, it's not $50,000, it's not $40,000.
It's actually a fraction of that.
That's my
very
point.
Small fraction.
That's
of that.
my point.
Yes.
And so the question is, why won't we do this? And I think it's because that's why we're really going to tackle this a little bit next year. This ostrich in the sand thing.
I totally agree with you. If you don't know how things work, then you're going to be one of those people, or your family will, who gets stuck in the system.
Yeah, and this is also kind of like the little caveat part of what we always end up talking about, because I'm thinking you see these ads, they're really attractive. I saw one on TV the other night, and I looked at my wife, and we both kind of rolled our eyes because we know better. But there was a couple of young guys, and they're like, oh, we're in all 50 states. This is so simple. Just click the box, and you'll have your will and trust done in 5 minutes. And I was thinking oh, this is future business for Bill Johnson.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways that can come back to haunt you, if you don't execute the documents correctly, and there are other laws that are, more specific to Florida, like that ladybird deed I talked about. We can do that in Florida, but for example, you can't do that in North Carolina. So if I have somebody who has a house here and a summer home in North Carolina, then we're probably looking at doing a trust to avoid the probate. Florida also has a homestead law that applies. If you're married and you're living in the house, there are some restrictions on how you can transfer that and how you can devise that to people. Also, a surviving spouse can claim what's called an elective share. That's usually equal to about 30% of the estate. So you can't just totally not leave anything to your spouse.
Yeah.
And so you have to know how all that stuff interplays as well.
And we've talked about this along the way. Not only is it a bad idea to, quote, try this on your own, meaning finding a form at a, in a bookstore or something like that, or, off the internet, because we know everything that you see on the internet must be true, right? It's a federal law or something. But also even people who have tried to do the right thing, maybe they spent their working years, up north, and they had a really good attorney put stuff together for them. It still needs to be checked out because things are different in Florida, and many times protections and things like that actually could be in the person's favor, but they got to know that to make sure that the documents work right.
That's very true. Florida protects the house from creditors' claims if you're leaving it to generally family members. And so that's a very big difference. That's only true in, I think, about 7 other states.
Wow.
So if you come from up north where you think, they're going to put liens on your house for Medicaid and things like that, it's quite different down here.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of states up north, the way they do their durable powers of attorney, they don't really work well in Florida because we interpret them differently. And so subsequently, a lot of those have to be redone as well.
Yeah. Wow. There's, when you think about it, so then you've got that aspect. And then there's another variation on this theme that I know we've talked about before. Sometimes a well-meaning family attorney who maybe has helped with real estate or some other things for a family along the way says, oh, I can help you get your, stuff done for estate planning. And yet, maybe they're really good at what they do, but they don't have the specialization and certainly not the board certification that you do. And you've had to sort out messes like that for people before, too.
I have. Yes. Yes. We just had an argument with one of our clients who whose son in California who does corporate law said our deed didn't look right, and we're like, no, it's exactly right.
Well, that's the whole point. You've got to have somebody. Joe and I'm talking about Joe Steckler, our president and founder, and everybody connected to the Helping Seniors organization. We talk about this all the time. This is why, for an organization to be effective, it has to be local, because you're dealing, first of all, as you've taught us over the time, each state has a different set of rules that you have to work within. Florida has some really good ones, so you need to know how to take advantage of those. This is why I think it's. I always love to tell people that not only are you board certified, but you're actually one of the ones that they call on from Tallahassee when they're saying, hey, we're thinking about putting together a bill like this, because you always help us at the beginning of the year when the legislature is in session and talk to us about this is what they're out there talking about, and this is how this could be good, or this is how this might not be good if it goes through, on behalf of seniors in Florida. But it's interesting because you really have your finger on the pulse of all that stuff too.
That's true. I work on the legislative committee for the elder law section.
Yeah.
So we look at all the new and proposed legislation each year.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope that as we've been talking about this, the point is, you will be in probate if you don't avoid probate. I guess that's a way to put it, right?
Exactly. You have to make a conscious effort to avoid it.
Yeah. And from everything we've talked about, in literally probably virtually almost all cases, we want to do that. And I would say at the very least, you want to make sure that you want to check to see that you want to avoid probate. And so a simple place to start, you said you've got actually a estate planning thing that's happening tomorrow at one senior place, and it may not be too late to get in on it. You just got to call over to the office and say, hey, can you slot me in? How do they do that?
They can reach us at 321-253-1667, or they can call One Senior Place. The seminar is at 10 a.m.
Okay.
And it is the One Senior Place located on Spyglass Avenue.
Yeah, so this is actually tomorrow. And so take advantage of that. And the other resource that I think is really valuable is actually the resource that your website, floridaelderlaw.net, because you have a really great publication that you've been doing for years there that I think is worth, because you can just go there and get it. I assume, by the way, I guess the Boomer Guide is coming out. Do you usually publish that in there too, right?
Yes, we do.
So that, I think, is coming up in November, where you'll have like the updated edition that's published in the center section of that.
Usually comes out after the first of the year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I thought they were doing a Boomer Expo or something.
Yeah, they do several of those throughout the year, but it's not a new book.
Okay, but you take the time to make sure that it's accurate with everything that's updating and things like that, which is the important part.
Yep.
So with that in mind, so FloridaElderLaw.net is a place that you can go and access that. And as I mentioned, I wanted to share before we got to the end of the show a couple of things that are coming up that you want to be aware of at the Senior Resource Center of Brevard. And these, we talked already that next Tuesday, talking about the 7th of November, next Tuesday, we're trying something new called Food Truck Tuesday. And it's just a fun, community gathering. There's going to be a great food truck that's with us there. And the fun part of this is that it's actually going to be a really great time, because 10% of the proceeds actually come back to helping seniors. And you get to have lunch with friends from not only the Helping Seniors group, but there'll be a bunch of people around from some of the other things that we do with our friends at Omni Healthcare and some of the doctors' offices around there. So all of these are things that really will be great for you to access and pay attention to. So a couple other dates that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of is, this is important too. This is Tuesday. This is a week after that. So this is also Tuesday, but it's from 10, it starts at 11 a.m. This is the 14th. That's why I said if you grab a pencil, you can kind of keep all this in play. We, together with our friends at Care Plus Health Plans and Omni Healthcare, they're actually doing a session, because you're getting all that stuff in your mailbox right now about open enrollment. And they want to make sure that you're actually getting the information that helps you. Not saying that what you're getting in your mailbox is wrong. It's just always positioned from the position that they want you to see it from, and may not always be in your best interest. So 11 a.m. Tuesday the 14th, that's happening at the Senior Resource Center. Again, I'm going to give you that street address, which is 1344 South Apollo Boulevard. We're Suite 2C in the Omni Medical Building. You can always call us at 321-473-7770, and we'll fill you in on this information. You can find it on our Facebook page. Another date I want you to keep in mind is just 2 days after that. So we just talked about Tuesday, November 14th, but on the 16th, we're doing something that's kind of fun called the Holiday Local Market Shopping Event. If you've been to the center, you know we have this great big lobby area that they allow us to make use of. And so what we've decided to do was invite a lot of local businesses to set up tables. I think there are going to be like 12 local businesses who have very cost-effective Christmas gift ideas for you. We're talking, $15 to $20 kind of items. So perfect for members of your family and things like that, all from local vendors who specialize in this. And Coastal Occupational Therapy is setting up a gift wrapping table. So not only are they going to have hot chocolate, they're going to have great things like that that's going on there. And you won't want to miss that. They're actually inviting a group, Bill Johnson, from a lot of the assisted livings. They're going to put some seniors on buses, bring them down there. They can shop local. They can get gifts for their family and friends. Get them gift wrap right there. Have some hot chocolate and just have a nice morning out. So that's going to be, I think, 10:30 to 3:30 on the 16th. Last thing I want to bring up real quickly is next year we're going sailing. We had such a good time on the 3rd annual Helping Seniors Foundation Cruise. We decided that there should be a 4th annual Helping Seniors Foundation Cruise. That is happening June 9th through the 16th. I want you to join the literally hundreds of people who will come with us on that. It's summertime. So, Bill, we're calling this a family reunion sailing, because a lot of the times when we went this year in October, well, kids are back in school. So what we want this to do is really become multi-generational fun. So grandparents, bring your kids, have them fly in, whatever you need to do, get the kids on board. Because as you know, when you get on a cruise ship, there's so many things that you can do so the family can get together for mealtime and everybody goes and does their whole thing. So it's not like everybody is camped up under everybody for that whole week. It's just a fun week. We get to go to Ocean Cay, play on the beach there. We get to go to Cozumel, Mexico. We get to go to Costa Maya. You can go even if you don't have a passport. You just need a birth certificate. So it's very simple. It's not a whole lot of hoops to jump through. Bill, they always make it a very simple thing to do. Chris and Betty are special needs certified. So somebody has special needs, oxygen, diabetic supplies, things like that. This is what they're equipped to do, is to make sure your travel is safe and enjoyable, not only for you, but your entire family. So we're going to have more information coming up about that. You can always find it at helpingseniourstravelclub.com. Bill, you should take your whole office with us next year, I would say, and your whole family too. But you don't want to miss that. Bill Johnson, board certified elder law attorney, thanks for sharing your time and your expertise on all this. And hopefully people will be at the seminar tomorrow who heard about us today on the radio, because this avoiding probate thing is pretty important. Save you a lot of money.
It is.
All right. Well, we'll see you next week then on the Helping Seniors Radio Show, 12 noon, right here on WEJF. Have a great week till then.